Social studies is defined as a subject that teaches students about how the people they interact with contribute to society and their own role in society. In social studies, students develop skills, attitudes, and knowledge and understanding that help them apply and acquire skills needed in and outside of the classroom to be active citizens. The Ontario Social Studies curriculum provides the connecting the pieces diagram that illustrates strategies, achievement of expectations, tools, and social studies. Think of it as the components of a salad. All of the toppings are necessary to get the desired result. First is the dressings of the salad that represents the goals. It is where the students will be developing different skills. There are different kinds of goals, just like there are different dressings, but you would only have one or two in a salad. One example of a goal is developing an understanding of responsible citizenship. All of the goals ensure students have all the components to make good citizens. Then there is the protein part of the salad, the vision portion of the diagram. It is the driving aspect of the planning. The vision allows students to become responsible, active citizens who will have the skills they need to solve problems in their community. Next is the citizen framework, the lettuce of the salad. It is what brings elements of citizenship education together. There are 4 components of this framework, just like you would have many different types of lettuce in the salad. All of them help build together the elements of citizenship education. They are structures, the power and systems within society, active participation, the work for common good in local, national, and global communities, identity, the sense of identity as a member of various communities, and attributes, the character traits, values, and traits of the mind. With all of those pieces together, I need to take them and apply it to the big ideas, framing questions, overall expectations, and the specific expectations. The big ideas is the understandings that students would train from their learning is transferred to other subjects and draw upon throughout their lives. It would be considered the cheese of my analogy. The big ideas provide context for the overall expectations. Framing questions can also help narrow down the learning and success criteria of the lesson. They are intended to stimulate students' critical thinking and to encourage them to consider the broader relevance of what they are studying. Next is the overall expectations. This is the croutons of our salad. They describe in general terms the knowledge and skills the students are expected to demonstrate by the end of each grade. Finally, the last piece of our salad, the specific expectations describe the expected knowledge and skills in greater detail. Like the veggies in your salad, there might be multiple specific expectations or just one in a lesson. You can also see the spatial skills continuum, which are the appropriate development of spatial skills and central to the social studies, history, and geography curriculum. Altogether, the connecting pieces diagram provides guidance for teachers to create lesson plans in a way that captures all of the information and knowledge students need to be good citizens, which is the end goal of social studies. As teachers, we must develop our own approach to have throughout the year. The inquiry process is one that I would want to facilitate. I think it is a great teaching strategy because the students are still learning content from the curriculum, but the specific topics that are taught are their choice. If I were able to create a classroom for my future students that emphasize inquiry learning, it would look something like this. As you can see, the desks are placed in a group setting, which allows for students to work with each other and bounce ideas off one another. I would have lots of different seating for students to choose where they would most feel comfortable sitting, including balls, stools, wooden chairs, and computer chairs. There would also be lots of books for students to use for research as well. The inquiry process highlights gather and organize this as being part of the inquiry model. I would want my students to have access to both primary and secondary sources to ensure the information they are gathering is correct. In the corner, you can see a space for students to present to their classmates. There's a smartboard for students to present their research. This would help highlight the communication portion of the inquiry model. Students will be able to share what they have collected from their research and answer their question. Group work can be stressful when students are not getting along. I have included a quiet corner for this reason. It allows for students to take a moment for themselves and regulate their emotions. The resource Everyday Mental Health Classroom recommends teachers to utilize the Calm Classroom, the stress management and coping strategies. The Calm Classroom involves a spot in the classroom for students to notice their feelings and regulate accordingly by sitting, reading, drawing until they are ready to enter the class. I would want to create a learning environment that takes students' feelings seriously. My teaching practice would have a deep involvement with mental health because it is a passion of mine. The Ontario curriculum provides information about the role of mental health in the classroom. It discusses how school events can have an impact on students' mental health. As a teacher, I would want to be knowledgeable and aware of my students' mental health and provide them with the strategies to cope. In my experience in my grade 3 placement, I found it beneficial to work with the students in a more collaborative way that allows students to use creativity and gain knowledge through asking questions. One activity that I did with my students was in social studies. They had workbooks with information to the unit they were studying, tours and sites in Canada. I asked my students to come up with 3 questions they could ask their peers from the information in their workbooks. This activity went well because the students were the ones with the information and I was only facilitating the conversation instead of being up front teaching the students information. If I were to create an inquiry lesson for grade 3 with the strand B2.1, formulate questions to guide investigations into some of the short and or long-term effects on the environment and measures taken to reduce the negative impact of that use, the related concept being cause and consequence, I can introduce the lesson by taking the students outside of the school on a walk, taking note of human activity that might impact animal life such as pollution. Students can formulate questions based on a natural environment of their choosing and how humans may have an effect of wildlife such as pollution in oceans, deforestation. Students will be able to gather and organize information based on what we saw on the walk outside the school and the discussions we hold afterwards of other impacts that have been made on suitable regions. In my personal experience, one of my neighbors did some light homeschooling with the kids in the neighborhood during the summer, which involved taking us to places like a forest or the park, picking up trash. We often make connections with social studies. Students will do research and analyze information for this project they will collect from primary and secondary sources to narrow down the topic they will be focusing on. Guiding questions could include what type of development might result in water pollution. Students will then evaluate and draw conclusions based on what they have found. The inquiry process can be easily extended to many cross-curriculars. For language arts, when the students read books, they can formulate questions they have about the book. For example, my students in grade 3 were reading the chapter book Wild Robot. They'd be able to create questions they have about the characters, settings, and plot devices. The students could formulate questions after reading the first chapter book, then find the answers through the reading. Another cumulative task for the unit strand A2.2, gather and organize information on major challenges facing different groups. I could introduce the topic by bringing in different books to discuss the point of view of that time. Throughout this presentation, I realized that I was planning on using the inquiry process in my classroom without knowing how students felt about it. The way I want to teach involves taking the perspectives of my students seriously. I asked my brother, who was in grade 6, doing an inquiry project about military services, what he liked about it. He said he enjoyed finding the answer on his own and working with a partner. Although my brother's opinion is just one opinion and he does not speak for all students, his responses told me the inquiry process fosters a learning environment that reading from the textbook and answering homework questions cannot. To conclude, I would include the inquiry process because it incorporates differentiated learning and universal design for learning. In terms of universal design for learning, a student who has an IEP that requires the teacher to give them extended time on assignments, I can get the same timeline for all students, which will help finalize the ideas of the project. The inquiry process allows for differentiated learning as well because I can ensure my students' IEPs are being followed based on how I create their groups and the requirements for the project. Such as students with anxiety who do not feel comfortable speaking to the class, I can accommodate by allowing them to record their speaking part to which I will listen to alone. The Ontario curriculum provides a helpful guide for teachers to give their students the best tools to become great citizens. My social studies philosophy is to create a student learning environment where students are welcome to voice their opinions without judgment. I would want to integrate the learning of how to be a good citizen while still making sure they feel comfortable at school to the best of my ability.